Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined by my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. We have a fantastic interview coming up. The MeToo movement, to put it mildly, was earth-shattering in the United States. But after several years out, there's a question about the efficacy and whether or not it actually had a lasting impact. One of those cases, at the very least, holds a mirror up to our society, was with Tara Reade. She's joining us today to have a conversation, and I think it's an interesting conversation and one that needs to be had to give some kind of retrospective on where we are as a society, whether or not the Me Too movement actually did what it set out to do. The voice that you guys are about to hear is Tara Reade. She's an author, former Senate aide, survivor, animal rights activist, actress, and poet. Her new book, Left Out, When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, covers the aftermath of the re-victimization of speaking out about the sexual assault with Senator, now President, Joe Biden in 1993. Tara, once again, I appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's start off just with the basic question. You put in the re-victimization from the standpoint of Biden. And just so people can understand, back in 1993, you make the point that Biden sexually assaulted you. Now, there was all sorts of corroborating evidence for this, so it wasn't something that could just be pushed away. There were people that you told about this. So from the standpoint of whether or not there was legitimizing evidence, in a way to use the word, it was clearly there, especially more so than even something like a Kavanaugh case that Democrats went bananas over. It wasn't just the re-victimization from the standpoint of Biden, but it was also Democrats. You were relentlessly and viciously attacked. And this was like immediately after the Me Too movement, where it seems like the Me Too movement didn't apply. What are your thoughts? I mean, what did you experience when you came out with this story? Because you didn't receive a safe space. You received the opposite of that safe space.
And that's a good point. No, I did not receive a safe space at all. And that was what was so ironic. Joe Biden's campaign was making announcement and other Democrats about how it takes courage and how they want to make sure there's a safe space for women to come forward. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Joe Biden was weaponizing a social media army of trolls to go after me. And that's been well documented now. One of those trolls was revealed to be paid quite a bit of money over a period of 2 months for this super PAC called Really America. And I think it was like $30,000 to $40,000. And he also smeared Cuomo survivors as well, backed down and then apologized. He still has not apologized to me. But Joe Biden's campaign was also entangled with Time's Up. And I had gone to Time's Up for assistance when I was coming forward with my story. And Time's Up is an organization that has about $28 million to help women coming forward about sexual assault or sexual harassment. And in particular, if the person is powerful, they have a program that does public relations. In other words, helps people that have to face publicity deal with that, because as you know, a normal American citizen, you don't deal with the media in that regard, professionally. And I went through the process of trying to work with Time's Up. Come to find out that Anita Dunn was hired by Joe Biden's campaign. They didn't tell me. There was a conflict of interest. I shared with them all the information about the assault and about the sexual harassment. And they still didn't tell me there was a conflict of interest. And of course, didn't help me. And then Ryan Grimm at The Intercept broke that story. So that was the first portion of the story that came forward before even the assault portion, which came forward on the Katie Halper show when I did that interview. What was stunning is that Joe Biden basically weaponized a public relations campaign against me to assassinate my character, to, discredit me. And the FEC report showed that his campaign spent about 2.2 million to date. Now, Anita Dunn is the senior White House advisor to Joe Biden. So it was very difficult, and I was very naive about the media. And basically I was used for target practice, as you know, all summer. by the New York Times and Washington Post. They quickly weaponized this story and made the investigation all about me. There was no investigation into Joe Biden, and there was definitely no safe space.
And there is a different aspect to the story that I want to come back to. Your transition from being a Democrat into becoming an independent, which I'm sure was partly due to your reflection on this process and seeing long-term corruption, a long-term cover-up of your case. And I'm guessing, and I would ask you, a deeper sense of disgust that this is how this issue is being handled for you, the assumption that this is how this issue has been handled for so many others. We're seeing this with Cuomo, but coming back to your case, how did you move? What's your political perspective? What party do you identify with, if any, at this point? And how has that changed as you've had to deal with this personal crisis that's become a larger political crisis? Tara.
Well, I think, in terms of, political parties, I feel politically homeless right now, essentially. I am progressive in my views, and I'm an independent, but, like you said, I was a Democrat all my life. I was, Lucy Flores called herself a Democratic foot soldier. I would describe myself as very dedicated to, I was, a person that not only just voted Democrat, but I was working for Democrats. I worked for Leon Panetta. I worked for, a state senator that was a Democrat. I did a congressional race. I was in the trenches, so to speak, in that regard. And I believed in the bigger policies. However, the foreign policy always disturbed me, and I'm anti-imperialist, and I don't like the predatory behavior of the United States in countries that are more vulnerable, and just trying to create enemies out of countries that don't want to be enemies by justifying the military-industrial complex. Spending $1 trillion or more on military, and while defense contractors line their pockets, it became more and more obvious that that was not where I wanted to go. And the Democratic Party started to drift more and more. I think from the time I worked in DC, it got more sharply right, if you will, and more sharply hawkish. That was my observation, at that age. But also, when I worked for Joe Biden, being sexually harassed in a U.S. senator's office, I was disgusted by that. And I had tried to go through protocol, went to my supervisor, another supervisor, to the chief of staff, filed an outside complaint, and I was sexually assaulted. Now, as many of you know from the Megyn Kelly interview, which I go into details about the assault, you know that it was sudden, it was unexpected, and my mother, I told that right after it happened, wanted me to go to the police. I had called her, and she was in California at the time, and I did not go to the police. And in retrospect, I wish I would have. But I did tell, other people around me. I was very traumatized by it, not only by what happened, by what he said to me. And also when I was trying to get help, I was really shut down in various ways. And then when I came forward in 2019, I came forward about the sexual harassment with the other 7 women that came forward about Joe Biden and his inappropriate behavior, and unwanted touching and such. And I, again, wanted to talk about the assault, but got really shut down. I was called a Russian asset or agent by Isaac Dovere of The Atlantic. And that marginalized my story to the point where, when I reached back out to Lisa Lair at the New York Times, I said, look, I want to talk about something else. She's acknowledged that I did reach out to her and that she didn't respond because she was kind of among those journalists that heard from Isaac Dovere that I was a Russian. I was just ignored then. And so I decided to go to Time's Up. And so that's sort of the path I took. I was very kind of lost as to how to come forward in a safe way. And then I just realized there was no safe way.
Wait, so just to be clear, they were able to denigrate a legitimate claim, and this is, again, after the MeToo movement, just by saying Russian disinfo. And at that point, everybody can go home and ignore what happened to you. That's astonishing. But look, that has been what's been happening, and the way that these guys have been talking about it, and the way they've been able to dismiss pretty much anything under that banner. Time's Up is interesting only because Time's Up was supposed to be an advocacy group to work in the interests of women in the very specific situation to which you tried to get them to act. And instead, they were basically working on behalf of the person who was the accused abuser. That's an astonishing case that these guys were intimately linked in that way. Do you think this is the case? Oh, this is norm. Like all sorts of women often have these experiences, and basically they're either blocked because of who that person is, or for that matter, not having anybody to go to the system and going forward. Meaning, do you think that the story is more normal than not? And the outcome of the story is more normal than not? And more importantly, what were you thinking after coming out of the Me Too movement and then seeing the way they treated your story? Was there a certain, I don't know what's the word for it, disorientation with this is the way the media is talking about sexual assault and how bad it is, and the Me Too movement and how women have more agency in coming out and more of a safe space, and yet they gave you a wall. Like they were very clear that no, we're not going to have this conversation about Joe Biden. And more importantly, why do you think they responded so viscerally to your story about Biden? And again, your story has all sorts of credibility going all the way through it, far more than, let's say, Kavanaugh. And to make this question more apropos, we had people like Kamala Harris, we had people like Elizabeth Warren, we had all of these Democrats saying, we must believe the woman, AOC, all of them, full bore. Kavanaugh is guilty of sin, and he is so guilty that he needs to be ripped out of the Supreme Court seat and not allowed to do it. And then we get to you. And all of those people, all of those smooth talkers had nothing to say. Nothing to say. How disorienting is that? And what did you think about all of those women that came forward in Democratic politics for, let's say, Kavanaugh, or for that matter, Trump? And then Joe Biden comes in with his own list of abusers. And I've heard people even make the argument, well, Donald Trump raped X number of women and Biden only has 2 rape allegations. Even that started to come up as part of the conversation. What did you think about that? And what were some of these people basically saying to you in response to what the Democrats in attack that these guys have took for it?
Well, the lesser of 2 evils is still evil, as the saying goes, right? I mean, it was stunning. I saw things I never thought I'd see from people that I supported. I mean, you have to understand too, some of these people I worked with, it was a betrayal on a level I can't even describe. I discovered that there were people I knew in my life that were paid to say bad things about me. And I think it's going to take me a long time to process all the amount of betrayals. I mean, because I have been as kind of a very active citizen in my democracy, and very active in politics. And I feel a cognitive dissonance, definitely. Like you were saying, this disorientation, I would go further. It's this cognitive dissonance of, like, I believe these ideals of, a fair minimum wage, of environmental policies and all of these different things. And then these same people that I would normally agree with are calling me basically a liar, either not saying anything or calling me like Stacey Abrams, just flat out saying that I wasn't telling the truth, although she had never talked to me. And, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, even Bernie Sanders, I reached out to every single one of them before I went public and tried to get help. And, it's not like I was a random person reaching out with some story. I had records and written things that I said, hey, I would like your help. I reached out and, I'm former staff. Not a word. There was no answer. Elizabeth Warren, I think, sent me a campaign like fundraiser thing in responance.
It's like, hey, I'm being molested, or I was assaulted by Joe Biden. Well, hey, can you donate to our campaign? Basically.
Right. Well, yeah, I didn't put it in so many terms, but I put it like you knew something happened and I was wanting to talk to someone. I was reaching out. So it was very difficult to get help. We're in what I've come to realize is that America has institutionalized rape culture. What you said earlier about how they were comparing how many politicians, how many rapes they had, that's so craven. That's so disgusting. But that really says a lot about where we are. There was such a demonization of Trump that it didn't matter who the Democratic candidate was or what they did. They were going to rally around this person that they decided in the back rooms with the cigars who was going to run. And that was Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's entanglement with DuPont, Bristol Myers Squibbs, and some of the international corporations are very well known. And, it's not like he was popular. It's, and if you talk to people, they were not even wanting to vote for him. And there was a big movement for another candidate, Bernie Sanders and some others. And basically the Democratic elites went away from 40% of the base, I believe, of the base progressives and who would have supported someone else. It was really hard to watch. It was hard to experience. When I was coming forward to backtrack just a minute, in January to Time's Up and whatnot, Joe Biden was rumored to be dropping out. And apparently that was just a rumor. It was never going to happen. But people believed it. I believed it. He was going to drop out of the race. And so I thought I was coming forward with the safety of the MeToo movement, which you mentioned initially, which that's political roadkill now. The MeToo movement doesn't exist. The hypocrisy on the Democratic Party is so strong that it's become laughable. And you've seen, pundits talk about it, and they're trying to just pretend like I don't exist. So at first they tried to, assassinate my credibility and my character. Then I was threatened with, they said that I lied about my education, which I did not. That extended to me being maybe charged with felony perjury.
Well, let's do this. Let's get into that after the break, because that's a really good case. I mean, like that was shocking when you mentioned that to me, that they were basically trying to get you to shut up by threatening you with prosecution. That's, in and of itself, that's profound.
The Me Too movement was started actually because it was so hard for Black women to come forward by Tarana Burke, and then it was kind of hijacked by Alyssa Milano, who works, with Joe Biden's campaign, and Alyssa Milano was very involved with the Kavanaugh, hearing, very outspoken. There were pictures of her crying at the hearing, and then when it came to me, of course, that all went to the wayside. So the Me Too movement, I think, was just, it was more optics. There was nothing behind it. There was no real movement. There was no real commitment to that. Democrats have shown again and again that they're using the mantle of Me Too as a protection to shield the fact that they're actually enabling predators and empowering them.
Let's do this. Let's take a break. We're going to come back with more Tara Reade. Tara, that is a profound story. I mean, just having to live through that and deal with that once in 93 and then having to deal with it twice by political actors saying that you're lying, by the guy who did it getting all of these accolades to the point of going into the office of the presidency, and all of the minions that are around that screamed, "We care about women's rights, always believe the woman," etc., especially Alyssa Milano, was willing to toss you overboard at a whim. And Rose McGowan ate her alive for that very level of duplicity. The voice that you guys are listening to is Tara Reade. She's an author, former Senate aide, survivor, animal rights activist, actress, and a poet. Her new book, Left Out, When the Truth Doesn't Fit, covers the aftermath of the re-victimization of speaking out about the sexual assault with Senator, now President, Joe Biden in 1993. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a moment. All right, this is going to be do-do, and we're going to start back almost immediately. Tara, I'm going to go directly into the lawsuit, because the lawsuit is profound. The idea that they were trying to threaten you with a lawsuit to get you to shut up about attacking Joe Biden. And this just even goes to the New York Post article where they were basically hiding that story about Hunter Biden now coming out to say, oh yeah, by the way, it's true, our bad. So all of this stuff kind of fits in. But we're going to come right back and let's start. Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined by my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. We're continuing to be joined with Tara Reade. Tara Reade is an author, former Senate aide, survivor, animal rights activist, actress, and a poet. Her new book, Left Out, When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, covers the aftermath of the re-victimization of speaking out about the sexual assault with Senator, now President Joe Biden in 1993. Before we left, you noted about a lawsuit, and this is astonishing. Please explain to us. They were basically trying to use this lawsuit to get you to shut up about coming out about sexual assault. Like, it went to this level. It wasn't just hiding stuff from the standpoint of the New York Post, where Joe Biden giving people this kind of fair hearing about, all right, here's the information about Hunter, here are potential crimes that Hunter committed in association with Biden. All of that was off the table. All of that was kept in the black, with mainstream media and social media working in tandem. But it wasn't just that. When your story came out, it even went to threatening criminal prosecution in order to get you to shut up about what happened in 93. Please continue.
Well, yes, it wasn't exactly a lawsuit. It was a criminal investigation. I later found out that there were sealed search warrants given to my college by the Monterey District Attorney. Now, bear in mind, I was an expert witness for domestic violence victims for the Monterey County District Attorney for several years. And I had a very positive relationship with them. And in fact, my testimony led to some positive things in the newspaper at the time of outcomes of educating juries about the cycle of violence in domestic violence situations, intimate partner situations. And it was as if, part of the destruction of my life was also destroying my career, not only just destroying my credibility, but like wiping off any good things that I did in my life. That's how it felt from my perspective. And when they said that I lied about my education, they then extended, there was a group of defense attorneys and a group of trolls kind of led by like that Kranz Sally Albright crowd. They went and did an email campaign to the DA to insist that they investigate me for felony perjury.
Wow.
That went on, and it would have been several counts of felony perjury that would have resulted in prison had I been convicted. It was very frightening. I didn't have the resources for a criminal defense attorney. I didn't really know how to deal with it. And, I didn't lie about my education. All of that was untangled. I got an attorney, and I was able to come to a mutual agreement with my college. And Ryan Grimm actually did a deep dive into this in The Intercept just recently. And he even went so far as going on Rising and called out the New York Times and asked them to correct the record, and other Politico and others for AP for misstating that I lied about, my education and that this wasn't true. No one to date has corrected the record. I've had an attorney contact media outlets to request that they do. We'll see what happens, but thus far, no one has. So in essence, I came through it, but it was several months of being in fear. They were also online. People were asking for me to be locked up for other reasons. They wanted me to be locked up for being a Russian agent. They wanted me to be locked up for, any kind of federal wire charges they could do. It was really ugly. And meanwhile, the Democrats were out in front of cameras saying it's safe for women to come forward. Well, I can tell you, I'm a poster child of how it's not safe. And one of the things I want to do is make it safe, make it safer. So I've been, one of the people that supported me early on, who before she was really public, was Lindsey Boylan, who came forward about Cuomo. And they started to smear.
Interesting.
Yeah. And she came out, I think, in May and April, tweeting about me. Anyway, we communicated via social media a few times, and I supported her. She supported me. And then she finally decided to come forward in the way that she did about her experience with Cuomo. But I was very nervous for her, and I made it very clear. I kind of did preemptive strikes. And Rose McGowan, as you mentioned,
she has been phenomenal on this subject, by the way. And she's been very clear. She's been consistent. And she's eaten, what's her name? Milano alive on this subject.
Oh, yeah, several times. And Rose was really helped me. She did the foreword to my book. So she's in that, and she has been an unending sense of support as far as and advice of what I was going to deal with, because Harvey Weinstein went after her much in the same way Joe Biden's gone after me. Coincidentally, Anita Dunn and Harvey Weinstein were connected. She advised Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So back to the original thing. I am now clear of any charges, of course. The Monterey DA came out and said they are not going to be charging me with felony perjury. My education was found that I did not lie about my education. And a lot of those things were backtracked, but of course, none of that is in mainstream media. So it's like, here, we're just going to destroy your life for a third time, but we're not going to correct the records. So.
Well, and on the press, I want to focus on that for a minute. I mean, you had a chance to experience the power, the ferocity, and the negligence of a lot of the press. You've already named several names here, whether we're talking about Isaac DeVere on the sort of bad side of the column, or Ryan Grimm, Katie Halper on the good side of the column, in terms of people who were helpful and honest. How has this series of relationships and this longer process affected how you view the press as an institution? And if you could name, good names, bad names, just for the sake of anybody watching this, for them to know, for them to support people who do good work, who has been bad and who has been good from your perspective. Tara.
Yeah, I will. I didn't realize, I had heard how partisan our media had become. And, it's like something that kind of floats around in your mind as a citizen, right, as an American. But you don't expect to have, the major players like the Washington Post and the paper of record, the New York Times, come after you the way they came after me. That was, or like Politico calling me a manipulative, user. And remember that headline? Just one article after another. It was really something. So I would say that what I discovered was the independent and international journalists were very much more trauma informed, much better. I've received a lot of support from Australian journalists, like Australia 60 Minutes did a deep dive and was very kind of just straightforward, objective. Megyn Kelly, as you know, she's an independent. She doesn't like corporate overlords, so she's independent. She was very good. Ryan Grimm, of course, is excellent. I don't know him very well, but he is an amazing investigative journalist and has now done 2 pieces on me, or maybe even 3. And Rich McHugh was amazing, who was a writing partner for Ronan Farrow for, Catch and Kill, for the Weinstein, and was also in his book, Catch and Kill, and they expose NBC. Rich McHugh has a lot of integrity. He's not interested in politics. He's interested in the truth. And so is Ronan Farrow. And those are good journalists as far as being objective. RT International has been they handled my story at one point. They were very careful how they handled it, and I appreciated that. In other words, they didn't exploit it. They gave me dignity and a platform to present it. And that was really, really good. As far as the media goes, it's become like the fourth estate in the sense that these powerful politicians with public relations agencies and money are now able to kind of weaponize. And the danger of that is you can weaponize against an American citizen like me with no resources and eviscerate them. So whistleblowers have a really difficult time now coming out. And Julian Assange is an example of how our government goes after whistleblowers.
That's a really good example. Let me ask you this. The Lindsay Bolin thing, was that something that was already known, that you had communications with Bolin just before she came out with Cuomo, or is that new information?
It's out there. It's been on social media. You could see our interchanges.
Yeah. I'm not saying there's anything nefarious with it. That's not where I was going with it. It was
publicly, we publicly supported each other. And she came out, I think, in December, talked on social media about Cuomo. So, but then didn't get into the press until she did her Medium article.
Oh, I see. That's fair. Let me actually, so let's get into your book for a moment. Well, 2 things. Your perspective on Cuomo, but I also want to get into your book and what was the reason and what was the impetus behind it. I think I know what the impetus behind it was, but I would like you to explain it. But more important, but first, the Cuomo thing. Cuomo has gotten a huge amount of pushback recently, and it's unclear on whether or not he would have ever gotten that pushback if it wasn't for all of the people that died in those nursing homes. meaning it's possible that the nursing home deaths weaken him to the point where the sexual assault victims could come forward. And without the nursing home deaths, the sexual assault doesn't get the groundswell, it doesn't get the traction that it would otherwise have gotten, meaning Cuomo would have continued to been able to be the non-stick Don, the Teflon Don in regards to the women that he would abuse. And this is what, 20 something years. And, it's like one woman after the next are talking about the exact same behavior. I want to kiss you on the lips. I'm Andrew Cuomo. Like this nonsensical, horrible behavior in parties and whatnot. And then he would say, I'm just playing. I was just joking. That's all. When I was asking these women these very uncomfortable questions about whether or not they have sex out of some wedlock or whether or not they would have sex with an older man. And I just so happened to be an older man, but I was just playing. Like it's this very weird pushback on what is clearly egregious behavior. What do you believe that the media and so many Democrats would have jumped on Cuomo in this way were it not for the deaths? If you don't believe that, what do you think is the reason why Cuomo has been all of a sudden so susceptible to these charges of sexual harassment? Like, because it came, like for your case, because it's a clear opposite of Biden. In your case, they entirely attacked you. You were the problem, not the fact that Biden most likely or potentially did it. No, you were the problem. The problem was that you brought it up. Trump is a clear and present danger. Trump is going to destroy America. And so Tara Reade has to be sacrificed on an altar of getting Joe Biden over the finish line. That's the way I saw it. But Cuomo, why all of a sudden were they willing to eat Cuomo alive when Cuomo was the guy who they were like, this guy's presidential, this guy's this guy's that? Why do you think so much traction was gained in regards to hitting him with the sexual assault stories?
That's an interesting discussion. And I think that I have a couple of thoughts on this. One is I think that there's a fight going on at a higher level in the elite Democrats behind some of the power brokers about Cuomo and about Biden. I think there's a power struggle playing out right now that we don't see or hear about. But it's there. And you might want to look at maybe Hillary Clinton's interest in 2024 and the governorship and that whole thing and who they want in that position, that kind of thing. So I think that there's some sort of struggle. The 15,000 deaths plus is horrible. And the fact that a staffer came forward and said, that they helped cover up the numbers and admitted what they did, that's criminal. It's awful. The sexual misconduct that he, continually, that sort of atmosphere, again, it has been covered up. It was like Biden, right? They say it was an open secret. People knew this about Cuomo. People know this about Biden, but it's an open secret, but they don't deal with it unless it can be used to weaponize to get the person to take a fall or go down. So I think you're right in that they probably weaponized. They decided, okay, let's let this flood happen. However, bear in mind too that Cuomo raised more money in his recent race than Joe Biden did in one of his for the presidential. He has a lot of support from certain people with a lot of money. So I think there's still a struggle. There was even talk that they were going to let the sexual harassment and sexual misconduct story die down and that he would still be governor and they would work through whatever happened with, the COVID, the situation that he oversaw. And I really think that there's a push to have him leave. And they're, again, using the mantle of MeToo because you saw Nancy Pelosi all of a sudden announce there has to be a criminal investigation into Cuomo. She certainly didn't say that about my case, did she?
No, she didn't.
No. So, and then you saw Biden finally say something in an interview saying that there should be an investigation and even said there might be criminal ramifications. And the audacity of that was amazing. But it also kind of said to me as a citizen, oh, okay, they've decided he's going to be thrown under every bus. They're done with Cuomo. And he's fighting back, but I don't know if he'll survive it. I don't think he will.
To survive this. I want to get into your book for a moment. So what was the impetus in you writing this book? And what is the thing that you're trying to communicate with this book? Meaning, because usually when people write a book, they have like a purpose behind the book, not just trying to articulate this aspect of themselves. They're also trying to do something in the larger physical matter reality world. What was your objectives and goal into writing this book?
Yeah, that's it. That's a good question. I felt very bad about the fact that my coming forward led to this pushback that was so strong that it had a chilling effect for other survivors to come forward. And it also, there's like a playbook of, and I wrote about it in an op-ed recently that was published on RT, but I talked about how, they silence, smear, attack, and then start again. There's like the cycle of what they do to whistleblower type people that come forward about whatever against powerful people. And I really saw that happening again with Lindsay Boylan. They started to and then had to back off, right? But when I was thinking about the book, it was partly survival in the sense of emotional survival, not physical, but like emotional. I was going through so much by writing everything down, by documenting it. I wanted to leave a message, I guess, for my daughter, her children, whenever they come into the world, and to other survivors, that even though I did have my life destroyed, I lost my housing, my work, I was almost, it was really stunning what happened, but I still don't regret coming forward because I didn't have to hold on to that information about Joe Biden anymore. I told about what happened and I stood up and I used my voice to stand in my truth. And that's so important because no matter what happens, we have to be able to stand in our truth. And, I did receive, as you noted, a lot of pushback. So when I wrote the book, I wanted to create a space where people could feel like there are ways you can come forward. Like, yes, this was my experience, but at the end of it, I also gained a lot of support. Like Avalon Clare is a person who did designed the cover of my book. She and a group of survivors and other people that are just interested citizens got together and support me. And there's a group of them online and social media and other ways. They check on me. They make sure I'm okay. But I gathered a community around me of people that cared, that didn't want to see a powerful person use all their resources to silence someone. So I wrote about that support. Rose McGowan, of course, other people that, I got a phone call from Anita Hill, which was very meaningful.
Interesting.
Early on. Yeah. And that was very interesting early on. I've had really interesting conversations with like Chelsea Manning. Yeah. I've had, different people talking to me about different things, but the theme is the same: to just stand in your truth, and you're going to get, blasted, but just stay there and stay with it and see it through.
That's basically what you're trying to communicate to your daughter with this book, that look, it was difficult, but this was the right thing to do despite the difficulty associated with it.
Yeah. It's I feel empowered in the sense that I used my voice to say what I needed to say. I also wanted to call out, some of the journalists, like the one from the Washington Post, which I talk about in the beginning of the book. She actually asked me the most inappropriate questions, which I won't say now, but you can read the book to find out what they were, but very inappropriate and was not trauma informed. So the other thing is that we need trauma informed journalists that know how to talk to sexual assault survivors so that it doesn't come out in bits and pieces and drips and drabs, and can come out in a more coherent way, and that's safer for the trauma survivor to kind of move through.
That assumes they're honest actors. Honest actors. That's the problem with it, right? That if the person is out there in order to cover for, let's say, their guy, as opposed to actually just do the story, then it's going to come out that way. They could have all of the training in the world, and that story is going to come out just that way because they need the framing of it to be that way. At least that's my thought. I could be wrong. I agree with you that
You're
there
right.
should be. Yeah, I totally agree with you. One last question.
The private sector, the private sector has now taken over journalism in the sense that you have these international corporations that own own sectors of the media. Or like, for instance, the Washington Post, who's it owned by? It's owned by, I believe, Jeff Bezos, right?
Yeah. Totally. Well, one thing, how much, you said you lost your house, your career. What did you lose in coming out with the story, and how did you lose it? Was it just the loss of the career that tumbled down into the other items the moment that you came out? Because what were you working in the capacity? You were a Senate staffer at what point? What were you when you came out to tell this?
Well, when I first came forward going through protocol back in '93, I lost my career immediately when I filed the sexual harassment report. You know, after the assault, and I had filed the sexual harassment. You know, I was unable to get a job on the Hill because I was forced out of Biden's office, of course,
Right.
and forced to resign. And then I ended up working for a state senator, and I still tried to hold on to my democratic ideals. I mean, I was an Obama supporter back in the day. Biden happened to be on the ticket, but I did vote for Obama. And I, was not involved at that point in politics, but I was raising my daughter, and, we had survived I had a difficult divorce and, survived domestic violence, and was trying to keep her safe. I had no intention of coming forward at that time about Joe Biden, and there was really no mechanism to do that. And then in 2019, as you know the rest of the story, so about coming forward. But yeah, what that happened when I was doing work at that time, I lost all my independent contracts. I was working on independent contracting and doing some other work, and you would Google my name and see these horrible things, horrible articles. And so it became difficult. I was renting a little house, and the owners of the property had heard on CNN that I had had death threats. They literally heard it on the news and came that next morning and said, you need to leave the property because you have death threats, and we're voting for Joe Biden, and we've heard these things, and we heard about your bankruptcy online. You didn't tell us you had a bankruptcy, because I didn't. And it had been years before, like 8 years before or whatever. But all of my private information was just available online, because the New York Times, one of the things that happened, which I skipped over, that was really difficult, was they, in the first article, they accidentally published my social security number.
No, they didn't. Are you serious? How is that a mistake? Do you think that was a mistake, or do you think that was punitive and intentional? I mean, that's a big deal. And I've never seen them do that, where they publish somebody's social security number.
I don't know. They published my congressional ID that had the number on there, and they didn't, because I had to prove who I was, or prove that I worked and all that. Anyway, they blamed it on the photo editor not doing it, but they had it online because it was we were on Pacific time, where I was living in California. And so I didn't find out until the next morning. My friend called me, and she was in a panic, and she said, cause she was on the East Coast. She goes, your social security number's online. Like, this is the front page of the New York Times. You have this article. And I was like groggy. And then she called the New York Times, and I called, and then it took a couple of hours. They finally got it down, but then it was
too late. It was already up.
It was already out, and I was getting messages with it. So that caused problems for me. It also allowed people to just dig through everything in my life if they're using that, set up false accounts. All kinds of things happened when that happened. So it really affected my life in seen and unseen ways. I had difficulties. I adopted a horse. I had difficulties finding a place to board him. I had to, as you know, leave my housing. Then, of course, I was being threatened with a criminal investigation. So it was kind of tough to get a job right then. With that pending. Yeah, it was a mess. It was pretty much a mess. I'm kind of laughing because it's like, I don't even know how I got through. And I wrote a book on that, but I did it. And yeah, that was an amazing time.
Could I have one more question? I know we've gone over, but your growth path on this, because I'd imagine anybody that goes through an experience like this grows from the experience, or devolves from the experience, one or the other, I suppose, right? There's no cosmic bias to it. You seem to have grown from this, and I don't know you before. I'm just talking to you now in regards to the way that you're trying to engage it. I know sometimes when it's dealing with something painful, the person might smile or laugh is kind of like a way of dealing with the emotion part of it. How do you see it? Do you see yourself as evolving from the experience? And if so, in what way? And just for the last question before we close out, if you had something to get across to people now, meaning when they're reading the book and it's something that you wanted to communicate to them, what would it be? Just a snapshot it. The first one, have you grown from this experience? And if so, how? And what would you want to communicate at the very end all be all of this book? What do you want to communicate to other women who are in the exact same situation that you're in or that you were in 93?
I have grown from it in the sense that I think I've gained some more emotional intelligence about dealing and just some knowledge about dealing with the world and how it works at this level. I kind of laughed earlier because it's just so absurd, some of the things I had to go through, just trying to tell a story about what happened in 1993 and how I got just taken down the side track. What I would say to other women is that, I have a strong sense of humor, and that came through in the book, and I have a strong sense of joy and trust. Maybe some people say I've been naive sometimes, but I don't want to lose who I am fundamentally by cynicism or by bad experiences. I'd rather, like what you said, learn and grow and expand my consciousness, expand my knowledge. And really what I want to say to other women is or other people coming forward about this difficult topic, is don't let them change you. This happened to you, but it's not all of you. It's just a thing that happened. You can move forward and you can live a full and interesting life beyond it. And if you want to help others in that regard, do it. Or if you want to heal your life and just move on, that's good too. For me, it has sort of cemented what I want to do, which is to write and to heal and to help others through their journey, and to call attention to our media and how they're treating people. I want our country to be better than what it is right now. I don't like the direction it's taken, and I want to be part of moving it in a different direction that's more positive. As far as me personally, work in progress, healing, and is a journey for all of us. We've all had trauma in our lives of different types. And then it's integrating it and then using it for something positive and that can help. Right? Because if, my philosophy that I've read, I think Gandhi said it, if you can't help, then don't harm. And that's what I'd like to do.
The voice that you guys were listening to in this excellent interview is Tara Reade. She's an author, former Senate aide, survivor, animal rights activist, actress, and a poet. Her new book, Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, covers the aftermath of re-victimization of speaking out about the sexual assault with the senator, now President, Joe Biden in 1993. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a moment. Tara, I want to thank you for this interview. I really do appreciate it. We went a little bit over, but I really wanted to get into your book, and I wanted to get your perspectives going forward. Both of those were important to me, and I thought the audience needed to hear both. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this. And this book, I'm going to get this book. Is it out currently? It's currently out right now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I am going to check this out because the story that you're telling here is phenomenal. And I was around during that time, and I could see the level of attacks that were taking place. And I thought it was appalling back then. And I'm pretty sure reading this book, it's going to be that much more so. So thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Well, take good care, and I will share the link.
Absolutely. I'll send it to you by the email.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe, I'm going to say thank you for joining us, whoever joined us. And there is a Neil. Hello, Tara. Never stop. Hugs. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it, right? I mean, look, you guys were around. You saw what she went through and the level of attacks from all of these people. Think back for the moment to Kavanaugh. Think back to the Kavanaugh hearings. And think back to the way the hearings were dramatically different than when she came out about Biden. Meaning the information that was out about Brett Kavanaugh didn't compare to the amount of information that was out from corroborating Tara's story. But from their standpoint, the honesty of it is they didn't really care. They didn't want Sanders to get into the race. They understood that between the two, it was going to be either Sanders or Biden. They didn't want Sanders to take it for a generation. They were terrified of Donald Trump. And so Biden became the person. And so to their logic, well, he's Joe Biden. We know who Joe Biden is. Trump might have raped 4 women, but Joe Biden only raped 1 or 2. This is an issue of math and practicality. It was those type of arguments that was being made, with media going far to protect Biden, not just from the Hunter Biden stories, but also in the case of her. So, no, yeah, I remember when she was first coming out, and I remember doing videos pushing back on basically the attacks that were being leveled at her. So I'm glad that she gave the opportunity to come on and give her case. I'm going to end this here. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I am going to say subscribe. Thanks, everyone.